And we're live.
Cool. Hello. Doing another office hours. It's been a little while since our last one, but trying to pick it back up.
Yeah, hopefully we are a bit more regular, scheduled. I don't know.
Yeah. I think we're going to try for every other week from now, because I think when we were going every week,
I
we
think it's
weren't.
also a lot of content and people
Yeah.
don't have a lot of time. So
Yeah. Yep.
I think the topic today was comms.
Yeah, let me, I was going to open up the spreadsheet just so I can read the particular question. So the question is, advice for shot calling and how to keep clear comms. How do you determine if information is useful versus not? And how do you let your teammate know that they are cluttering up the comms? We talked about this a little bit, and we decided that we're going to try to focus on personal comms. There's some information that I think is pinned, that Heron pinned in coaching and educational content if you want more information on shot calling roles in a team environment. And if people are interested to have us talk more about that at another time, we can do that. But I think that's kind of like a pretty big topic, on its own. So we are going to focus on kind of, your own personal comms best practices and comms in a solo queue kind of environment, or, do a queue, something where you're not playing with a bunch of people.
A ladder
That,
environment, basically.
yeah, a ladder environment where you're not playing with a bunch of people that you know and have
established
a lot of
synergy with. You're
synergy.
finding randoms and they have no idea how you comm or what you're going to say or what your traditional callouts are.
Exactly.
Or what you're like. So, like, as an example, like, there are people that we like. There's like, based on time zones mostly, like people that I play with more so on Xbox, and I just know their voice now, and I know what heroes they are probably playing. So when they just say like this is a terrible thing to do on ladder, but when someone says like Genji on me, like if like Jenna says that, then I know that because I know what hero she's playing, and so I'll know probably whereabouts she is. So it's easy for me to know, like, all right, I need to go to my backline. But if you're playing
Right.
on ladder, when someone says Genji on me, I'm like, who in the world are you? And so I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, so who is this? Is this my main tank player? Is this my flex DPS player? Is this my flex support player? Like, who is this? I have to figure that out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and it's really difficult too, right? Like generally, the only indication that you have when somebody is talking is the little icon that shows up that's got the hero's face, but that's only showing up for as long as there's actually sound coming from your microphone. And if you're actually playing, somebody's not going to have time to figure that out. So in a ladder environment, of course, as much as possible, if you're making calls related to yourself, try to talk in the third person. That's pretty common piece of advice. So if you're playing a support or something, often what I will do, rather than saying Genji on me or Genji on our, Mercy or whatever, I'll say Genji in our backline, because I think people are a little bit more likely to have a sense of like where that is in relation to them. If you're a tank, the backline's probably behind you. If you're DPS and you're up on high ground, you might have some idea of where kind of your vulnerable squishies are going to stand. And that might be a little bit easier for people to identify than like, I don't know, I haven't seen the Mercy in the last 30 seconds or whatever. I don't know where she is.
yeah. This is something that does change as you move up and down the ladder.
Absolutely.
So, like, from my personal experience, like, I can get away with saying like Doomfist on me, or like Doomfist on me in the back, and or like this was back in probably like season 11 or season 12 or something. Back when or I when goats was less of a thing and Hanzo was better, but I could get away with saying that, and then because like my Mercy players, like they're like if I'm playing Zen, my mercy, if I say that someone is diving me, like she knows to come find me.
Hmm.
Like I can just say like insert flanker on me, and my mercy will find me. Generally speaking, like you can't say that in like mid gold. They're not gonna find you.
Yeah.
Like they might know to recognize and be like, it'll take them a second to be like, oh, it's my other support player, and then they're like, okay, through their head, they're like, all right, it's my who's saying this? It's my support player. All right, where is my support player? All right, I found them. All right, what do I need to do? Oh, I need to go heal them. And then it's like this. It's this whole process, and it's much slower. Like when you move up and down, like when you move down the ladder, kind of thing. It's so just
Yeah,
being more descriptive in short bursts. I think lower on the ladder is helpful.
I agree. And I think this goes into the question of how do you determine if information is useful versus not. And unfortunately, there's not a super easy uh, answer to that for similar reasons because it's different in different areas of the ladder, right? The general rule of it, whether information is useful versus not, is that information that would change what your teammates are doing and that they don't already have is useful information, right? So if you're playing in Diamond or Masters, it's generally not going to be helpful to, for example, call out every death that happens, right? Because that is already on the screen. There's a kill feed, and presumably nobody or almost nobody is making it to Diamond and Masters without having learned how to pay attention to the kill feed. So at that
I would push
rank,
back a bit on that.
no, okay,
I would push back on that. The kill feed gets ignored more than you think. Um, Mostly because it's like I would say it's difficult to in once once an engagement has started. Um, Generally the most important thing. So like I'm gonna split this up actually. So in my elo and in my personal experience and opinion, when you're playing dive, the biggest thing to know is first death. So generally speaking, you can watch the kill feed for that first death, and then after that, it's like, all right, let's start cleaning up. Unless they get like we have to punish the res if they're running a mercy, and
mm-hmm.
so like watching for first death, and then after that, you don't have to pay as much attention to it. So first death is easy. So watching everything else that's happening is difficult. It's easier to listen for ult callouts to think that way rather than watching the kill feed for them because you're taking your eyes away from where you need to have them to focus. This is my personal opinion. In like Deathball and Goats, it's so much easier to like glance up at the kill feed because everything is literally in front of you. Like if you're playing Goats, it's 6 people in front of you, and you don't need to. Oh, what's it's less spread out, so like everything's generally in your field of view. Whereas in Dive, people are very spread out, so it's like, all right, who's flanking me? Where's their Tracer? Where's our Widowmaker? Is there Genji sitting behind us? Like, what's going on? So it's like
That's fair.
more
I
turning around and more focusing. Whereas like with Goats and Deathball, it's like, okay, I can take a quick glance up to the corner easier. But
I
also
do think
like
as a general rule, like people are much more likely to be completely oblivious to the uh, what kills have happened lower down in the
oh,
ladder.
100% I agree with that. Like
Um,
if you were to
and
go down to the very bottom of the ladder, like they have no idea what's going on. Like the under 500 SR people have no idea
sure,
what's happening.
and I would say, I think in most areas, like lower down, it may be useful to let people know what kills have gotten. I think sometimes, especially in silver, gold, and even low to mid plat to some extent, calling deaths on your own team may be more important than calling deaths on the enemy team because people will know when they have contributed to a kill. That shows up in the center of their screen, and it's often what they're focused on. Um, but I've played in plenty of games in plat, and when I was in gold and when I was in silver, where people would get real excited because we got 2 picks and they want to go in. But they don't realize that actually we have had 2 picks against us, and the enemy has spawn advantage, and so it's not actually an advantage to go in on 2 picks if you've had 2 deaths. on your team. So I think at lower ranks, making sure that people are aware of the deaths that have happened on your team. But even better than that is being able to tell people, okay, what is the current status of the fight? So, saying like, oh, we're down 2 is useful, but saying we're down 2, it's 4-on-6 is even more useful, because that tells your team like we're at a big numbers disadvantage here, and it's much clearer what to do. If you're saying like we're down, it's 4-on-6, it's much clearer that means we can't fight this. And
Yeah, I would say that's better lower on the ladder personally. Is like higher on the ladder, um, you will probably know like who dies first and who dies second,
mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And
Yeah,
so
and
I
that's
traditionally will call out, it's like get out or die on cart kind of thing.
right. Yeah, that's kind of what I meant about how the answer to the question, what is useful information, is a
Yeah,
complicated one, because it
it
depends on what
varies.
you can assume people are already going to know, right? Because
Yeah,
if you're just repeating the stuff that they already know, then you're creating comms clutter.
yeah,
But then what they're already going to know is going to differ. So, I guess in terms of calibrating it for yourself, like an easy first step is trying to call the things that you wouldn't have noticed if you were somebody else, perhaps, or the things that you notice people in your level sometimes aren't seeing.
yeah.
Um,
I want to interject really fast. I see Otter posted something.
oh,
Otter,
okay.
would you say that these are quote unquote devolved team fights, in the sense that like it's been dragging on for 15-20 seconds and they're just calling out whoever's dead? Because I'm interested to see this. See, because
If wait, did you say what the question was on the thing?
yeah, Otter's question was, or his statement was, it's interesting listening to what we're talking about while also watching a 4.4K game and hearing players call out deaths over comms.
Yeah, so I think when watching higher level players play, like they will absolutely call out deaths, but it's not all of them.
It's
I think
generally key
it's
deaths, and if the fight's been dragging on, so
right.
like if it's like something that's been dragging on over a point for like 20-30 seconds, you're probably going to be calling out who you're finishing, just so because you've probably lost people yourself, so they'll still be in the know on what they're coming back to.
I think yeah, I think key times to call deaths would be if your team has some sort of plan that involves triggering on killing someone first,
Yeah,
right? Like,
if
oh,
if you mess with their win condition, or you get, or your own gets messed with, generally speaking.
right, right.
So like an example would be, you're going to EMP Nanoblade to win a fight at the end of a point, and your Genji gets headshot. Like, he needs to say something immediately.
Yeah, if you're a member of the plan to win the fight, then you have to be very clear that you died and that you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
If your team's plan is, we uh, jump the Zenyatta and EMP him and kill him, and then we get to Blade or whatever, so that
Mm-hmm.
we don't have the transcendence. Then calling the like, okay, Zenyatta's down, Genji go for the Blade. I'd say also,
The Genji
oh,
Nano
that's
headshot
funny.
literally happened in the match I'm watching as you said it.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
that
were
happens a
prophetic,
lot.
Hibachi, prophetic.
Yeah, that
Um,
happens. The reason why I brought
I
it
would
up was
say,
because it happened to me in a scrim just the other day.
mm,
We were going to EMP Blade, and I got headshot right before we EMP'd. So that it happens more often than you think.
yeah, and I'd say also if you're making a call where you say, oh, this person is low, they're going to get the mega over here, then it makes sense to call when they're down, right? Because you've thrown a piece of information out there. Now maybe your teammates are on the lookout for that. Makes sense to call when that piece of information is no longer relevant. So if I say like, oh, the Hanzo's won, he's heading for the Mega, and then I either say like, okay, Hanzo's down, or never mind, Hanzo got healed, he's now full health, he's no longer a vulnerable target. I wouldn't say all of that. I would say, Hanzo won, Courtyard Mega on the right, never mind, he got healed.
You
So
could just
like,
say
just to kind
Hanzo
of
got
like,
Mega, because that means the same
yeah,
thing. And it also tells your team that they cannot go to that Mega.
good point. Yep, see, that's even better information. But just in those like little micro bits, if you're throwing out something about someone is low, just tying it off so your teammates know like if this is complete is useful.
Yeah, and I think that. So I'm gonna hop back to what Alice brought up. She asked, "What about calling out when your supports are dead?" Just
Mm-hmm.
saying if there's no heals. That is, in my opinion, a very clear call. If your team doesn't understand what that means, then they have other issues. But
Yeah,
generally,
I'd say that's an especially important call
yeah, especially at lower
in
levels. So,
in
um,
ladder and yeah,
yeah,
at
if you're
lower
on
levels.
ladder and you're solo queuing and you hear a no heals call, then someone needs to call if the fight is winnable immediately, or and so you'll keep fighting on the point. So like, let's say it's like 3v2, and like, or it's 4v2, and your only support left gets headshot, and so now it's 3v2. So you hear a no heals call. Someone has to immediately call if it's winnable, kind of thing. I would hope that someone would call if it's winnable, but this is also a ladder. But a no heals call is kind of like it's an ultimatum in my opinion. It's like either, all right, we're all inning on this fight, or we're backing off immediately.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um,
At least that's in my opinion, because you have no sustain, and so you have to either throw ultimates or
mm-hmm.
really focus down remaining targets really fast, or you have to back off. Yeah, Joe, it is do or die, basically.
Yeah, it's a situation. I mean, definitionally, when you have no healing, you cannot win or survive a sustained fight, right? You literally have no
Yeah.
sustain. So,
Obviously,
uh,
there are edge cases where, like, if you have like a Roadhog May, if that's like your comp and you have both of those, if like your remaining heroes are Soldier, May, Roadhog, then yeah, you have some sustain because they can
mm-hmm.
all heal themselves, but that's like a specific edge case kind of thing.
Right, right.
But I, especially to wrap this up, especially letting your teammates know at lower ranks that there are no heals so that they have no sustain is, I think, an important thing to do. I think it's kind of important at higher ranks because mostly it's like that tells your team about win conditions coming up on this fight or their
Yeah.
chances of winning this fight to begin with.
One thing that I used to do a lot from the support position, beyond trying to let people know that they didn't have any healing, and oftentimes, like when I was playing in gold or silver, oh, well, probably not silver as much because I don't think I'd learned to do this when I was in silver, but when I was playing in gold, I would specifically say, friendly Mercy or friendly Zen, friendly Lucio or whatever down, and then also explain that that meant that they had no healing. Um, One of the things I used to do as a support that now everyone can do since we have outlines, but is still easier to do as a support, is if I'm coming back from spawn and people are still fighting, I'll sometimes let them know how many people are there. Um, and that's again something that's probably more useful at lower ranks, but a lot of times people won't realize how many people are in the fight, or while they're running back, even though everybody has outlines now, they won't pay attention to how many chevrons and outlines are in front of them. So calling like, we only have 2 in the fight, they're about to die, or especially as a support, you can say we only have 2 on the fight, they're both critical, they're going to die, don't go in.
I think
And
anyone
that
can
can
say
let
that while
people
they're death
know.
spectating. Like if you skip kill cam, you have about
Oh
8
yeah.
seconds to call something out on point. Be like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
there's only 3 of you left or whatever.
Yeah, it's something that I mean, after you've spawned, obviously you can't do that by spectating anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that you can use, especially your support, like wall hacks. to give a little extra information because you have a little bit more information coming back from spawn.
Did
But
you just say to use wall hacks walking from spawn, or you're using your support?
Your support wall hacks, yeah,
Okay.
your support wall hacks.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean the widow ult.
I was like, I'm skeptical about the wall hacks.
Yeah,
I'm not sure I'm using wall hacks in that fashion.
Support wall hacks. Your built-in support wall hacks.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, that can be a useful thing, especially if you're playing in ranks where it's really easy for your teammates to lose track of how grouped up they are.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that in terms of determining information that's useful generally, like across the board, try to think about whether the information is actionable, right? Like letting people know if you've died and you're somebody in a key position for the team is useful potentially. If you died to a threat that other people aren't seeing, then letting them know, hey, I died to this threat is here, is useful. But like things that people can't do anything about anymore tend to be more comms clutter. So these are obvious examples. A lot of people that I hear in solo queue or in ladder scenario will give information about what just killed them and how they were killed exactly, and that doesn't usually give you, and like it already happened, you're dead. It usually doesn't matter how you died. It's possible that you were killed using some important ability that person doesn't have anymore, and now they're vulnerable. It might be worth calling, like, hog no hook, he's way out of position, he just killed me, but you guys can get him. But generally, like, if you're talking about past events and it's not helping people make decisions moving forward, it generally is better to keep that stuff to yourself. It might be useful for you when you're going back in to review the VODs, but if nobody on your team can do anything differently or would do anything differently based on the information that you're sharing, then it's generally not helpful.
I agree with that. If it's not actionable, or if it's not something that someone could do something about, or like if it's not something that would change the way that your team would play, then it's probably not the most helpful.
I'll also say, as a corollary to that, if you're not intending it to change what your teammates are doing, then you probably also don't want to say it, because some people will take it as a direction to change what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So like informational callouts can be really useful, but especially in a ladder scenario when people aren't used to playing with you, they may not know the difference between you saying, I'm trying to give you this piece of information, and I'm telling you to go shoot this person.
Yeah.
So, you know, as an example that I remember happening to me in a comp game a little while ago, we had like a Reaper who was behind us and low health and was going to get a mega health pack that was behind us. So I called like, hey, there's a Reaper behind, he's gonna pop up with full health. And
Mm-hmm.
4 members of the team rushed off into a side corridor to jump on the Reaper, leaving the main tank and just the main support like fighting the other 5 members of the team. And so that was a situation where like I did not intend people to go find the Reaper now. I intended to like, please be aware he's behind us, let's reposition so he can't gank us. But I didn't share that information in a way that made sense to other people what I intended. And they took it as action to go jump on the Reaper. And that caused our team to get split. And then, you know, we lost that fight. Mm-hmm. So it's can be good to call out the things that you notice, but do be aware of situations where people are going to take it as a call to action when you didn't mean it that way, and whether it would make sense to whether the information is maybe something to hold on to until it's time to take action on it, or if you have a chance to say more explicitly what you mean, then you can try that. But that can be really difficult when you're playing with people you don't know.
I think that's a little tough to try and pull off, especially on ladder, to try
Mm-hmm.
and remember to say something like 10 seconds down the line.
Yeah, oftentimes I think the better thing to do in those situations is simply to prepare yourself for whatever it is incoming. For example, you might notice that the Farah has disappeared and you're pretty sure that she has barrage.
Yeah.
You can tell your teammates, I think the Farah is coming behind somewhere to barrage. But if you don't know exactly where she is, then that might just be a distraction to your teammates. So it might make more sense for you to position yourself to try to respond as effectively as possible when it comes. And if you get another signal, oh, now I hear her flying, now I know exactly where she is, now I can make a very specific call, Farah is about to barrage back left, then you can call it at that time. But otherwise, you just try to position yourself to deal with it as best as you can, and not inadvertently send your diva off on a wild goose chase looking for a Farah when you don't know where she is.
Yeah.
uh,
I think
I
that
hope that
kind of
distinction makes
ties
sense.
into ult tracking, though, like that little bit there, and then you do that between fights, kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just because, like, you're not going to do major ult tracking in the middle of a fight, because it's like, all right, what you generally do that when, and this is another thing where it's differentiated between higher and lower ranks. Is higher ranks are generally better about just not trickling in general.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and at higher ranks, ultimates generally come on a very regular schedule. Like, if you were to go and watch like Seagull play, he's the most popular Overwatch streamer right now. Like, you can go and you can like set your watch by the times that most people have their ultimates. It's very rarely that like ultimates are quote unquote off schedule unless someone's either really popping off or they're just feeding and not getting ult charge.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think it's not quite as regular further down.
it's not, and so you get a lot of variance, and so like you'll get, and so here's what the issue is, like so platinum's like one of the most popular ranks, platinum and gold.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get, let's just take a look at a Zarya on a Koth map. So Zarya with like passive charge barely gets her ultimate at the end of a single Koth round. And so like if she's not doing anything, she'll get one graph.
Mm-hmm.
But if their Zarya is doing a whole heck of a lot, like go and watch like Carpe play Zarya. Carpe will have like 3 grabs in a single Koth round, which is absolutely insanely fast. Because it's just like it's just the difference. And so you get so much variance. And so that's what happens in like Koth maps is you'll find that Genji player who's really really good in platinum because he only plays Genji, and he just happens to luck into a team that has like a Winston and a Diva main with him, and his life, and he queues with a Zenyatta player, and so his life is just super easy for a single map. And you're like, oh my god, this Genji's popping off on us. What can we do? Other than play Brigitte forehead. But he'll get like 3 blades in a single round, whereas maybe your team also has a Genji, but you're playing like Rein Zarya with a Brigitte, and a Genji is your DPS. And you're like, our Genji's not doing anything. He's not doing any damage. He builds a single blade. And this is in the same elo. And these could be like the same skill level Genjis. They could both be 2700 SR Genjis. But there's just such a variance.
Yeah, I think in mid ranks, oftentimes, like, you might get a sense for how quickly an individual is charging their ultimates, just over the course of playing the game with them. But personally, I find that looking for behavioral cues is a lot more reliable, and then also just generally like, okay, it's been a certain amount of time, I know they have their ultimate. But in terms of knowing when that's going to happen, the Farah hasn't ulted in a while, and you hear her hover jets somewhere in the behind you. She's about to drop down and barrage, that kind of thing. But how to determine the behavioral cues that indicate that someone is about to pop an ultimate is like a whole other thing from doing the calls. But I guess the point, to bring it back to the point about comms, sometimes there are these informational callouts that can, they can redirect your teammates' attention in a way that isn't actually helpful, or if it's too far ahead of time, then they're going to forget. So trying to make sure that you're making the calls at the times that are closest to when people can do something about them, which also means potentially, like, if you see something coming further ahead of time, maybe you have to say it twice. Maybe you say, I think the Farah is going to come behind us in barrage, and then try to position yourself on whatever hero you're on to deal with that as best as you can. And then, when you get the cue that it's about to happen, then you can call it again. But yeah, I think there's a certain state that I think especially people in mid elos will get into, because they went on Reddit and they read that they should be shot calling all of the time. And then you have 4 or 5 people who are playing who are all kind of narrating their own lives and telling their whole team who they're shooting at any given moment. And generally nothing dies at that point, because nobody's actually listening to anybody else's and everyone is shooting someone else different, and then getting frustrated that there's no focus fire, because everyone was shooting someone different and talking about it and not actually listening to
So here's a tip
any of those
for
calls.
people who want to learn DPS going up the ladder. You're not the star. You're not the star. Like, if you want to move up, I would say one of the simplest things to do is whatever your main tank is doing, just also shoot that thing. Whoever it is. Because main tanks they can't switch targets very well unless they're Orisa. But if it's like Hamster, if it's Monkey, if it's Reinhardt, they have very limited range on the targets they can shoot. So if you're a DPS player, shoot the same thing. They'll die faster. Like, that's the simplest thing to do, is just 2 people shooting at one person makes that person die so much faster. You don't even have to have Discord. Just, it's more the sense of, it's not who can I kill, it's who on the other team. It's not who on the other team I can kill necessarily, it's who on my team can I help. And generally that answer is your main tank.
Yeah, I'd say generally if you're playing DPS, your comms probably should be fairly limited by default. Like,
they should be. You should be calming cooldowns that would affect your tank players and affect you as by extension as well. But that's about it, really. Like, there's not a whole lot of comms you should be doing. Let your supports talk. Encourage your supports to talk. If you're a support player on ladder, you should be taking charge and just being like, I'm gonna call as many things as I can. If you're playing Moira or Mercy, you should be calming the most, because you have the least mechanical demands on you, and so you are allowed to basically just survey a lot more. If you're playing tanks, be very, very vocal on who you are attacking. And that's really all you have to do.
Who you're attacking, and probably also when you're going to make movements and be more aggressive or less aggressive. If you're going to make changes to your current level of aggression, it's good to let your teammates know that as well. I would say also, especially from a ladder perspective, like if you're playing support, I often like to let people know when I'm with them, and especially when I'm not with them. If I was with them and I had to leave them to go do something else, especially if I'm playing someone like Mercy and I'm hanging out with one of my DPS players, then I'm going to try to let them know as often as possible, like, hey, I have to go heal someone else. I'm not with you right now. And it's also good from the support perspective, like, when you're in the back, if you see that things are happening and you think that your main tank needs to be more or less aggressive, don't be afraid to ask them to step back, because you have better vision. So like, hey, we're getting attacked in the back, please, slow down a little, Reinhardt, or come back to us.
Yeah, I
Back up,
think that
that kind of thing.
as a support, we're kind of skewing away from ladder play and more towards team in
Yeah,
this
I guess
sense.
that's true.
But I think that just simply if you're playing backline support, moderating your tank's aggression is important. Just letting them know, like, hey, I can't keep you up there. Like, that's too aggro. Just so they know. So, like, maybe, like, they can adjust. And that's a case where they can either listen to you and adjust their playstyle, or they're on their own, basically. You've let them know. So, but I was listening to Siegel again the other day, and he was saying that this is more of a team thing, but it was like it got to the point where he would call Transcendence on the team, not Unco, in stage 4. So he would call out when Trance was needed because he was a lot closer to OG. And so when he and OG needed healing, he would call for Unco to come in Trance because Unco's too far away.
Interesting.
So it was just kind of an interesting thing. That's a team tidbit.
Yeah.
But like it's like your tanks calling for an ultimate, or like your backline calling and like moderating aggression kind of thing. It's like you're moderating their behavior in a certain way. But that's more in like a team thing where you can trust that they'll listen to you.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think, yeah, in general, right, like your supports probably should be talking the most, followed by the tanks, and then DPS kind of the least. As much as you can, also use your chat wheel for common things, because that happens a lot faster and it takes up less space in the comms channel. So if you need healing or you want to acknowledge somebody, it just, as much as you can, using the chat wheel is useful.
Yeah,
it provides more space.
Please don't
for people to
abuse
say
the need healing button. Like, please only use it when you actually need it. It is something I personally been working on, and I really only try to ping it when I need it. And so it's like, I'm not kidding when I ping it. So please save me.
Yeah, I sometimes forget which button I have bound to need healing and which button I have bound to thank you. So sometimes I respond to getting healing by saying I need healing, and I wish so badly that I had an I'm sorry button. I hit the wrong one. I meant thank you.
I actually do not have that one bound. I have alt status and need healing bound. Because those are the two ones that I find to be the most important.
Yeah, I find I use thank you, like healing and thank you to me are the ones that I need the most while I'm fighting, which might be a mid-elo adaptation. Like the need healing one is obvious, but like the thank you one is an attempt to just kind of generally keep my team in good spirits, and so I use that one a lot, and so I have that
interesting because I'm not a big thank you user.
There's the other issue too, where if I use the chat wheel and try to like hit the chat wheel and then select thank you, it's really easy for me to accidentally emote, and you can't cancel the emote. And there was this game that I was in where I had a Moira who was just never healing me as Winston, and then I asked, like, was like hiding next to her and asked for her healing, and she gave me an orb, and I tried to say thank you, but I accidentally did my little Winston bookie instead, and then we got caught out and we died, and I was like, oh my god, I was accidentally just the biggest troll to this Moira because she finally healed me, and then I emoted and got us both killed. So that's another reason that I have the thank you button, but that's completely side thing. Okay, so the last thing, well, I guess before we address the part about how do you let your teammates know if they're cluttering up the comms, did people have any other questions about how to know whether things are useful? and how to keep the comms clear. Going once. All right, Otter says she has something.
I think also while Otter's typing, I think one thing is to directionally. I've been asked this before. Okay, we'll get to Otters in a second. Sorry, I'm just gonna make this point real fast. Sorry, Otter. Keep typing. But asking about specificity in like locations, I would say that for the bulk of it, you don't really need super specific call out locations, especially on lower ranks, because like generally your team is all oriented in the same direction, especially like on like 2CP or like control maps. Like you're coming from one direction, so it's like, oh, soldier top left, and most of the time that's good enough. There are more specific callouts that are like as you move up the ladder, you'll figure out like you kind of get exposed to. But unfortunately, there's no like almanac or glossary of callouts for all of the maps.
Yeah, there's a few common ones. Often, like I think it makes sense, for teams and stuff to have some that you agree on.
Yeah, so like I wouldn't be using your team specific callouts on ladder unless you know people know what they are. Like so like on Nepal Shrine, there's a big elephant near the port or near the point. If you call elephant, most people should know, at least in my games, if I was to do that and be like, oh, there's a mercy on elephant, most people would know that. Like everyone should know that. Your mileage may vary as you move down the ladder, but like common things like that. Like on Gibraltar, you could say, "Oh, there's an Anna in ship," and most people know what the ship is.
I call it shuttle, but yeah, sure, people will know what the big spaceship is, space shuttle.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're in doubt, high, mid, low, forward, back, right, left are pretty much always valid, and you can generally assume that people will know.
Yeah, because
the direction that you're in talking about forward is whatever general direction your team is trying to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So Otter's question here is that she feels like she has trouble being physically incapable of talking on comm. So I have a follow-up question to you, Otters. Is this a thing where you feel like your mouth can't keep up with your brain kind of thing, or are you feeling like you have trouble breaking into comms because other people are talking?
Mouth can't keep up with brain and okay, so it's like it's moving. It's like too much going on the screen, and your voice is soft. Okay.
So, I would say in terms of your mouth can't keep up with your brain, like talking and thinking and acting all at the same time are like it's a skill, right? That's not something that people can do naturally. Like learning how, like you don't just make calls. You don't just make calls clean or well or in a timely fashion. It's something you have to actively work on. So it's okay if you feel like you can't say things fast enough. I would say to try to pick something small and just try to call out like one segment of kind of the breadth of things maybe you want to say, and try to get used to calling that in particular. So I think Otters, you play a lot of Mercy, yeah. So
that's a yes.
I think yes.
For our listeners, yes.
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to think like what would be a good first step for calling. for calling things on mercy? Like, what would you say would be like a first thing to try to get used to?
As someone who doesn't have a whole lot of hours on mercy, I would say that probably the most important thing this is my opinion, is, and I'm basing this off of the way that I play other supports, is the most important things and the simplest ones are when you're calling out your abilities. So, like, as Lucio, I'm calling out speed boosts. As Zenyatta, I'm calling out discords. As Ana, I'm calling out sleep darts. If you can just start with calling out and trying to get your teammates to support you before you go in and res, because that's a very important ability, because it lets your teammates know they have 2 seconds of no healing from their mercy and that you need protection because you're basically a statue.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I mean, that's one, like, if you started out just letting people know when you're rezzing, then that's not one that you're going to have to do a whole lot. Another one I think that's useful to get used to basically in any support position, that you might be able to practice doing sometimes, without maybe it being too overwhelming or too much to sort of keep track of, is if somebody is like just around the corner from you, and you want to get to them, to let them know, like, Roadhog, take a step to the right so you can fly to them. Because both of those are something where you're making the decision to do something and you're not having to respond real fast to something that's happening to you and then figure out what the right call is and then say it. So those might be a little bit easier to start with to get yourself used to saying stuff. If you feel like you're having trouble breaking into the conversation, honestly, you could just mute everybody on your team and
Actually, I
just talk.
recommend this, actually. So if you feel like you can't break in a word edgewise, and you think that your team is being, like, either toxic or just yelling or loud or whatever, you mute everyone. Just mute them all. What they say is probably not going to be helpful to you if you're solo queuing on ladder.
Especially if you're playing the main support, right? You have the
Yeah.
most important stuff to say.
Yeah. So just mute everyone if you want to. If someone's being helpful, you don't have to start the game by immediately muting everyone, but I would say that muting someone is probably, or muting your teammates when they're just trying to talk over you, is very valid, especially because ladder play, I think, should be viewed more as improving yourself. Excuse me, rather than, like, I'm gonna try and get the biggest number I can. Because let's face it, we've had, honestly, what season are we in? Is this season 13? 13. We've had 13 seasons of ladder by now. It's the same thing. Blizzard's not changing it, so let's try and get the most out of it that we can. Like, it's going to be it's a mess, basically. So
And I'll
using it.
say,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to the point of muting, you mentioned people talking over you or being toxic. I personally take, like, the my trigger for muting people it's a very low threshold for muting people when I'm playing on ladder. Like, doesn't even, like, I have a few things that I have, like, learned that I think are pretty decent predictors for someone is going to be toxic, but also predictors for, I think this person is just going to blather on the comms, and they may be perfectly nice people who are trying really hard to help their team, and they just don't realize that they're saying a lot of stuff that's totally useless and making it hard for me to think. Don't be afraid to mute those people. Like, don't feel like you have, some responsibility to listen to somebody just because they're trying. If, like, they get to practice doing their comms, but you don't have to be their guinea pig if it makes it difficult for you to play the game. So yeah, don't be afraid to mute people if it's interfering with your ability to talk or interfering with your ability to think. A lot of what people are going to be saying to you in the comms isn't going to be useful. And that's double especially true if you're playing main support, because you have the most important stuff to say usually anyway. So yeah, that's my advice there.
I like the muting idea. I think mutes are underutilized in this game, to be honest.
I think so too. I think, and I mean, honestly, like, there are times when I just, like, it's, like I mentioned before, like, doing comms is a skill, right? And it's something that it takes a lot of practice to get good at. It takes a lot of practice to be able to do it without it taking up, like, kind of a lot of your brain cycles.
Yeah.
And both giving comms and receiving comms take up bandwidth on your brain. And
it also
sometimes
will
you
change
just
based
can't.
on the hero you play. Like, as an example, my comms are exceedingly better. They are leaps and bounds better when I'm playing Zarya and Zenyatta, because you're forced to calm a lot, and I'm very comfortable with those heroes. Like, I talk a lot, but when I am on a DPS hero, something that's much more mechanically demanding, like Widowmaker or Genji, or I'm playing Pharah or something, then I'm much quieter because I have to focus and I'm not used to calling as much. And there's also less that I have less utility to the team too, so there's less important things for me to say. So your comms will vary by your heroes as well, and your comfort on the hero pool.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, there are times when it makes sense to reduce the amount of incoming stuff that you have, because it'll reserve more brain space for you to work on your own comms and for you to just pay attention to your gameplay. So, for example, I have a support alt that I made, and I'm more or less one-tricking Ana on it. I'm playing a little bit of Mercy at times, but mostly playing Ana. So I've largely been going into team chat, because being able to tell people when they're in my sightlines or not is pretty important to me being able to fulfill my function, as well as calling things like purples and sleep darts. But because I'm still new at this hero, like, I have pretty much a hair trigger for muting people, and I have played a lot of games where I've got everyone or almost everyone muted, and I'm just talking and I'm letting people know, when they need to go for healing and when I'm reloading and when I'm doing darts. But, like, I just don't have the brain space to listen to other people talk and communicate the information that I need to give out. And in that main support position where, like, Ana provides a lot of utility potentially, but it does require team follow-up and awareness in a lot of cases to get the value. So that's one of those situations where, like, I think getting the most value on the hero, I need to be communicating my uses of those abilities. But there isn't as much coming in that's likely to be useful. So I've been defaulting to muting more so that I have more brain space to focus on actually playing a hero who's fairly mechanically demanding and that I'm new at. So I'm not as comfortable, and I can't do it as easily. It requires more of my brain space to focus. So
I think, kind of tying back into what Otters was saying here, I think that this is more for like a server thing here, but I think that we should take the opportunity when we can to actually rotate and assign shot calling duties for people. Like in when we're doing, okay, and I'm gonna preface this and be very specific. Pugs, in my opinion, are competitive rule set games with lower stakes. No one's putting SR on the line, that kind of thing. We're just playing it's a pickup game. So we've got 12 people together and we're playing competitive rule set. Customs are what I view as like the fun game modes that we kind of mess around in and no one really cares. So when you're in a pug and then you're assigning, and in this case we can assign someone to practice being like main shot caller kind of thing, like the ones who does like the ult tracking, that kind of thing. And then we have target calling, that stuff. So, and then just practicing, and we can rotate through that because we can do like 3 or 4 maps in a day before I think people get exhausted. but rotating through that and giving everyone who plays main support like that chance to be like the lead shot caller kind of thing. I think that could be helpful.
Yeah, that's actually something that we'd really like to do. Fiona and I have talked about this a lot for, as you know, we're spinning up the new PS4 teams. We picked our initial rosters today. But yeah, the stuff about team shot calling is specifically out of scope for this office hours, but I think getting a chance to learn those specific roles in a team setting, I think you can take that back and have that be helpful even on ladder play, although obviously you're not necessarily going to be able to depend on people in the same way. But I hope that we will be able to make more opportunities for people to practice those like really well-defined shot calling roles. Because I got to say, like personally, as someone, I play a lot of main tank, and then I also play kind of main support, which are both roles that tend to take, one of the shot calling roles in a team setting. In a main tank position on ladder, a lot of the times I end up doing both the sort of like main shot calling, play calling role and the target calling, unless we have a main support who's in comms and, actively doing that, which just doesn't happen that often, at least at the level that I play. And holy crap, is it exhausting trying to do all of those shot calling roles at once and then also like be mechanically effective on my hero and pay attention to what's going on. Like I often find it so much more tiring to play a session where I'm playing main tank than I do to play a session where I'm playing main support, because I can usually depend on the main tank to at least be projecting who they want to be shooting at by shooting at them, even if they're not calling it. So I hope that we'll have more opportunities to have in pugs or in practices for teams to practice those separate roles, because I think it's such a relief almost to be able to say like, okay, somebody else has this other role, I have this role, these are the things I'm responsible for, and I'm just going to depend on the other people to do their side of the comms, and I don't have to worry about it, and it's just kind of relaxing.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of let someone else you let someone else take the reins for a while, and you kind of just get to focus on like more micro stuff. And it's
I've played
very
some games with Fee where we very explicitly made her, a play caller when she was playing Mercy, and it was really nice to have her boss me around and tell me where I was supposed to go and when, and I could just do it.
Yeah.
And then say who I was shooting.
Yeah, it's like I'm shooting the monkey, 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 and that's literally like that's like the call.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually kind of like, all right, this is nice. I don't have to think so much.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing I will say is, and I think this applies more for ladder and when you're solo queuing, especially as supports. Be as demanding, and I know this is hard because a lot of people doesn't match their personalities, but be as demanding and annoying as possible with your calls. Like, if you need help, don't try not to be like nice about it. Like, kind of be selfish and mean about it. Like, because it's like if you're running, so like let's say we're running classic dive, so we're running Monkey Diva Mercy Zen on ladder, and we'll run a tracer for whatever reason, and then the flex DPS can play whatever they want. Be demanding. If you're the Zenyatta player, be like, don't just be like, hey, there's a tracer jumping me, I could use some help. Like someone's in the back line on your Zen, blah blah blah, and just kind of nonchalant, kind of right about. Just start getting really loud and annoying in your microphone and keep saying it over and over and over and over and over and over until someone responds to you or you're dead. Because eventually they'll either do something about it and come save you, or you die, and at which case, like, eventually they'll just have to respond to you. They'll either tell you to shut up and you can be like, well, save me then, or they come save you, in which case you got your way, basically. So
I will say, I think that when you're playing support on ladder, you should absolutely call when you need help, and you should also do your best to learn to take care of yourself and get out alive if your teammates
that is true. You
don't
do have
help
to
you.
find a way to be self-sufficient. But
Yeah, I mean, but you should do both, right? You should
yeah,
call it, and then you should also not depend on your teammates to definitely save you.
yeah,
And I think you can do both. And you know, the more that you practice the skills to take care of yourself, which generally involves, among other things, improving your awareness and keeping track of the enemy heroes who are going to come after you, particularly, right? And who that is in particular may depend on which support you're playing. But it also means that you can make better calls for help because, you know, for example, I mention this a lot, but like I spent a lot of time learning how to take better care of myself as Zen, and one of the things that I learned how to do better was keep track of and hear the flankers coming sooner. And so then I'm able to make better calls further ahead of time to say, hey, Tracer is coming through right side mini. I think she's going to jump on me. She's going to pop out in like 2 seconds. Here's the Tracer. She's discorded. Tracer, 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 Tracer. And like I've given my diva or whatever 2 extra seconds to respond to the call and help me kill her. And then it's pretty likely that that discorded Tracer is going to die to a prepared Zenyatta and a diva than it is in this situation where I don't say anything until I'm getting shot. So I think it's one of those things that, like, learning to take care of yourself helps you make better calls, and then those calls allow your teammates to help you more effectively and have a little bit more runway to do it.
yeah. It's a little what is it? The boy who cried wolf. Is that the story?
Maybe.
Well, where
What's
it's
the?
like in this case it'd be like, oh, you're asking for help all the time, and there's a lot of times where you don't really need it because you could have done
Mm-hmm.
something, and so maybe your team like doesn't respond as quickly
Mm-hmm.
on ladder. Whereas like if you're only calling out when you really need help, like if your diva immediately is like let's say you're again the Zenyatta or like a backline supporter, like if you're playing Mercy and you're getting dove by a tracer, like and you're only calling out when you really need the help, so your diva can try and focus on keeping your Winston up. But
Mm-hmm.
every time you call for help, your diva goes in and matrixes you, and she allows you to fly away. And she sees that and be like, "Yeah, I kept my Mercy alive. I did a great job." Like that, that visual reinforcement of like I did something will get your team to react faster and better because they had a positive reinforcement of an outcome. At least in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you know, I think people also appreciate, like, as much as you can call out that you're going to need help before it happens, that also helps people have a successful attempt at peeling for you, and you know, that makes everybody feel good and feel better about playing with each other. So always good to uh, invest in a positive playing experience with your random teammates who may, you know,
They're
explode at
random,
any
so you're gonna
moment.
get a assortment of people. You're gonna get all
Yeah.
kinds of people. So
I don't know if we've ever really addressed the final question in this question, which was how do you let your teammates know that they are cluttering up the comms? And I gotta say, most of the time, I have not particularly had much success asking somebody to change
mute them.
their
That's how you do it.
comms. Yeah, I'd ask him to mute in situations where someone is clearly trying to be helpful and isn't in the like frantic and tilted because my teammates aren't helping me in the place where nobody knows where I am or even who I am. Sometimes I'll give nudges to be like, okay, sorry, can you let us know where you are or who you are that this is happening to you? Like, you
That's
said you saw
about
the
the extent
Reaper.
of what you can
Where
do,
is
though,
he?
in my
Yeah,
opinion, because it's really it's really
I
easy
wouldn't.
to flip someone toxic by just
Mhm.
like pushing them too much, and it's I think better to just like either let it go or just mute them and just lose out on what they're saying because the comms are if they're that cluttered, like if it's 80% clutter, 20% helpful, I think that you're better off just muting.
I agree. Because you're losing a lot of brain cycles sifting through the 80%, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think, you know, we mentioned before, like, keeping your calls relevant and clean is a skill, right? Like, this takes work, it takes learning. Like, you can try to learn the concepts, and it's going to take effort to learn how to apply them, and that's okay. But that also means you're not going to be able to teach that to your teammate over the course of the game while they're actively trying to apply other skills that they have, in this active game environment.
Yeah,
You
you've
just
got 15 minutes with this random person, and do you think
exactly.
that in a 15-minute session you can try and coach someone that you will probably never see again how to
You,
effectively communicate? If
you
so, I
can't.
applaud you, and you should probably be a professional, like a
Yeah,
professional
it's
psychiatrist or something, or just someone who is
it's
professionally
it's
good at
very
teaching
likely
people to
going to
talk.
be an exercise in frustration for both of you.
Yeah.
So, if it's someone who's like they're very close in to having calls that are right and they just need a little nudge in the right direction, um, then yeah, go ahead and try to give them a nudge and see
Easily, very,
if
very
yeah.
small.
Um, but otherwise, I'd say if it's a lot of clutter, just mute them. And if other people are complaining about the clutter, remind them that the mute button exists.
Yeah. That's really all you can do. I mean, no one here sits at like top 500 level where you will see the same people over and over again, and so you know
Mm-hmm.
everyone.
Right.
So, like, don't hesitate to mute that random person that you know you will never see again. I mean, legitimately, it's very rare. I see people that I actually have seen multiple times. It's very rare. So, don't hesitate. Just these people aren't worth it. It's not worth your time. That's my 2 cents anyway.
Agreed. And I mean, even if they are perfectly wonderful people, you just you can't you can't do anything effective. You're going to frustrate yourself at the very least. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Trying to teach someone significantly new. Sorry, trying to teach someone something significantly new over the course of a 10 to 15-minute match.
Or even something that's so complex as communication, because there's so many different ways to communicate that there's no way
Exactly.
you can express the nuance required in a pressure packed environment like that
Mm-hmm.
in 15 minutes.
Yeah, agreed.
So basically,
All right.
TLDR, or TL didn't listen. Use the mute button, people.
Yeah, don't underestimate the value of the mute button. Being in voice and listening in voice is not as crucial as Reddit would have you believe, unless you are GM or above, I think.
I would say in Masters, like you're expected
Okay,
to be on comms. Um,
sure.
but yeah, it's uh, other than that, comms are take it or leave it, even in Diamond.
Makes sense.
So
Does anyone have any other questions on the topic of personal comms, clean comms, relevant information, that kind of thing? We might actually wrap this up in an hour-ish from when we
hour
actually
and 8
started.
minutes right now. This is
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah. Look at us. We're learning and growing as
We're getting
office
better at
hours
this.
people.
Look at
Yeah.
this. Look at this progress.
we scoped. All right, cool.
I think
Well,
we did it. All right.
thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for stopping by, everybody. No questions, it looks like. Thanks again.
Hope it was useful. And yeah, if you have more questions, like please, there's a form that's pinned in the coaching channel. Other things that you want us to discuss, just drop them in there, and we'll try to address it in a future office hours. I know we have a few questions that have come in that probably aren't going to be so easy to address in just the voice format, but if you have something like that, feel free to drop it in and we'll try to figure out a way to do that in the future, maybe mix up the format a little bit perhaps. So
Yeah, I am. If we do need to do, if it includes video recording, I'm using OBS right now, so I can record my screen as well. So I can actually post that directly to YouTube.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. We might do that in the future. But
okay.
yeah, more questions, let us know, and we will have the next one of these in 2 weeks.
Yes, 2 weeks out. And if, for those of you, actually, just as an FYI, this will be posted in the coaching archive hopefully tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you for doing the recording.
No problem.
All right.
Uh, have a good night, everybody, and thanks for stopping by.
Bye.